Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we explore the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm James Carrington, and today we're traveling to Fort Worth, Texas, just a couple of days before Christmas in 1974. Three girls left home for what should have been an ordinary afternoon of holiday shopping. They never returned. More than 50 years later, no one knows what became of them. The disappearance of the girls, who soon became known as the Fort Worth Missing Trio, remains one of Texas's most haunting unsolved criminal cases. The date was December 23, 1974. Late that morning, 17-year-old Rachel Trelica was behind the wheel of her 1972 Oldsmobile 98, accompanied by 14-year-old Renee Wilson and 9-year-old Julie Mosley. By early evening, Rachel's locked car had been found in a crowded shopping center parking lot, with Christmas purchases still inside, but the three girls had vanished. Then, on Christmas Eve, a mysterious letter arrived claiming they had left voluntarily and would return within a week. Tragically, they never did. Rachel was a student at Southwest High School, and she had recently married Tommy Trelica. She had planned to spend December 23rd finishing her Christmas shopping and invited several people to come along, but only two accepted. One was Renee, who was dating Julie's older brother Terry. Renee expected to return home later that afternoon to spend time with Terry before attending a Christmas gathering with her family. Julie had not originally been included in the shopping plans, but after Terry decided not to go, she repeatedly asked her mother, Rayanne, for permission to accompany the older girls. Rayanne initially refused because Julie had little money to spend, and she didn't know Rachel well. Eventually, however, she agreed after Julie promised to be home by 6 o'clock that evening. It was an ordinary decision made by a mother just 2 days before Christmas, a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Shortly before noon, the three left in Rachel's Oldsmobile. Before heading to Seminary South Shopping Center, they stopped at an Army-Navy surplus store to pick up merchandise that had been placed on layaway. Although later accounts differ over exactly whose items were collected, the stop itself is well documented. They then continued to Seminary South, one of Fort Worth's busiest shopping centers, where thousands of people were completing their last-minute Christmas shopping. The available record places the girls at the shopping center that afternoon, although many later accounts of precisely where they were seen are difficult to verify. What's certain is that they did not return home when expected. Renee had planned to be back earlier in the afternoon, and Julie was expected to return by 6. As the expected times passed without a telephone call, members of their families began to worry. By early evening, relatives traveled to Seminary South to look for them. Shortly after 6 p.m., Rachel's Oldsmobile was found in the upper-level parking area near Sears. The car was locked. Its keys were missing. Christmas presents and other purchases remained inside. 2 pairs of jeans collected earlier that day were reportedly found in the trunk. There was no immediate explanation for why all 3 girls had left the vehicle, or why none of them had returned. The shopping center was crowded, the day was nearly over, and Christmas Eve was only hours away. Somewhere between the morning departure and the discovery of the Oldsmobile, Rachel Trelica, Renee Wilson, and Julie Mosley had vanished without a trace. The families remained at the shopping center searching and waiting, hoping the girls had simply become separated, accepted a ride from someone they knew, or encountered some delay they would soon be able to explain. Relatives checked stores and questioned people in the area, but the 3 girls did not return to Rachel's car. When police became involved, the case was handled through the department's Missing Persons or Youth Division. Early investigators considered the possibility that the girls had run away, an interpretation their families rejected from the beginning. The runaway theory was extremely difficult for relatives to reconcile with the circumstances. Renee had plans for that afternoon and evening. Julie had asked for permission to go shopping for just a few hours. Rachel had left her car and the group's purchases behind. Although none of those facts proved that an abduction occurred, Together, they gave the family strong reason to believe that the girls had not simply decided to disappear. The investigation faced a central problem from the beginning. No confirmed crime scene had been found. Rachel's Oldsmobile contained no publicly documented evidence of violence. The car had not disappeared with the girls and therefore offered no obvious route to tracing their movements after the shopping trip. The keys were gone, but that fact alone could not show whether Rachel had carried them away, whether someone else had taken them, or whether they had been lost under circumstances unrelated to the disappearance. Investigators and relatives sought information from anyone who might have seen the trio at Seminary South. Over time, several people claimed to have observed the girls inside the shopping center or in the surrounding parking areas. Some reports suggested they had returned to the car during the afternoon, yet the surviving accounts are inconsistent and many cannot be independently confirmed. No publicly documented sighting establishes exactly when the girls left the mall, whom they were with, or whether they departed voluntarily. One early story involved a woman who reportedly told a store employee that she had seen girls matching their descriptions being forced into a yellow pickup truck near a grocery store at the shopping center. However, police were unable to locate the original witness, leaving them with a second-hand claim that couldn't be tested. Although that account is disturbing, it can't be treated as a confirmed description of what happened. It remains a mere possibility within the history of the case, not an established fact. As the night of December 23rd gave way to Christmas Eve, the families still had no idea where the girls had gone. Then an envelope arrived at the Trlica residence. Its brief message initially appeared to offer an explanation. Instead, it created a mystery almost as enduring as the disappearance itself. On the morning of December 24th, one day after Rachel, Renee, and Julie disappeared, Tommy Trlica checked the mailbox and found a letter addressed to him. According to Rachel's sister Deborah, she was at the Trlica home when Tommy came back inside looking surprised. He handed her the envelope, and her first thought was, "This makes no sense." Curiously, the letter was addressed using Tommy's formal name, Thomas A. Trlica, rather than the nickname Rachel ordinarily used. The envelope was reportedly addressed in pencil, while the message inside had been written in ink on a sheet of paper wider than the envelope itself. Published reproductions of the note vary slightly in punctuation and formatting, but the message is generally reproduced as follows. "I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears' upper lot. Love, Rachel." For a family desperate to believe that Rachel was alive, the note might have seemed reassuring. Yet its arrival raised immediate questions. The information about the car was already known by the time the letter was received. The message offered no explanation for why a 17-year-old newlywed, a 14-year-old with holiday plans, and a 9-year-old child would abruptly leave Fort Worth together. It didn't explain why they had abandoned Rachel's car and their purchases. Most importantly of all, the promised return never occurred. The envelope itself contained irregularities that have been debated for decades. Rachel's name, handwritten in the return address area, appeared to have been written or corrected awkwardly. The postal cancellation was blurred and didn't clearly identify the city from which the envelope had been mailed. Some reports have attempted to interpret the incomplete postal markings as particular Texas zip codes, but those interpretations remain uncertain and shouldn't be treated as proof of the letter's origin. Handwriting examinations also failed to settle the issue. The letter and envelope were reviewed more than once, including by the FBI, but the publicly reported results were inconclusive. Some later commentators and examiners have offered opinions about whether portions resembled Rachel's handwriting, but no conclusion has been universally accepted. The responsible position is that neither Rachel's authorship nor a forgery has been conclusively established. The families didn't believe the letter demonstrated that the girls had run away. Julie's mother emphasized that her young daughter would not voluntarily disappear just before Christmas. Renee's family pointed to her plans to return that day. Rachel's relatives also questioned the language and presentation of the message. Their reactions don't prove that the letter was fraudulent, but they're important because they came from people who knew the girl's habits, relationships, and handwriting better than outside observers did. If Rachel wrote the letter freely, then she was alive sometime after leaving the shopping center and was capable of mailing a message. If she wrote it under pressure, the note might represent indirect evidence of coercion. If someone else wrote it, its purpose may have been to delay the investigation by creating the appearance of a voluntary departure. Each interpretation is possible. None has been proven or disproven. The letter therefore occupies an unusual place in the case. It's a physical object directly associated with the disappearance, yet it answers almost nothing. Instead, it leaves investigators facing the same fundamental question: who wrote it, and what did that person know about the fate of the 3 missing girls? In the weeks and months after the disappearance, the families distributed photographs and missing person notices while investigators followed reported sightings and other leads. Newspaper and television coverage carried the girls' faces across Texas, while relatives continued pursuing new leads long after individual tips had failed to produce results. One of the difficulties was that the case generated many stories but little verifiable evidence. People claimed to have seen the girls in other cities or traveling with unidentified adults. Others provided accounts involving vans, pickup trucks, security personnel, or men behaving suspiciously. Some witnesses may have been sincere but mistaken. Others came forward only after years had passed. None of the prominent reported sightings has been publicly confirmed as an observation of Rachel, Renee, and Julie after their disappearance. In 1981, a man reported that he had witnessed what he believed was a girl being forced into a van at Seminary South on the day the trio vanished. According to the published account, someone connected with the van told him that the situation was merely a family dispute. The delay of approximately 7 years severely limited investigators' ability to test his memory, locate the vehicle, or identify those involved. 2 decades later, in 2001, a former Fort Worth police officer who had worked security at Sears reportedly said he had seen 3 girls with a mall security guard on the night of the disappearance. This account, likewise, has not been publicly established as a verified sighting of the missing trio. It's another example of a potentially important claim weakened by the passage of time and the absence of corroborating evidence. Over the years, investigators have also examined locations where human remains were discovered. In the 1970s and 1980s, remains found in Texas were compared against the missing girls, but those examinations did not identify Rachel, Renee, or Julie. Each negative result removed one possibility while leaving the broader mystery untouched. The case was assigned renewed investigative attention in later decades. A homicide detective who reviewed it in the early 2000s expressed the belief that the girls may have left the shopping center with someone they trusted. That's an investigative opinion rather than a proven conclusion, but it reflects one explanation for how 3 girls could depart a busy public place without a clearly documented struggle. The theory is especially plausible because familiarity can lower suspicion. The girls might have accepted a ride, walked toward another vehicle, or accompanied someone while expecting to return shortly. That could help explain why purchases remained in Rachel's car. Yet the theory still requires an unknown person, or more than one person, capable of preventing all 3 from returning or contacting their families. No publicly identified individual has been proven to have done so. The opposite possibility, an abduction by a stranger or strangers, also remains unproven. Removing 3 people from a busy shopping center parking lot would have carried considerable risk, but crowded places can create their own form of concealment. An argument beside a vehicle might appear to witnesses to be a private disagreement. Children accompanying an adult may not immediately attract attention. These possibilities explain how an abduction could occur, but they do not establish that one did. After years of investigation, the case remained suspended between three competing explanations: a voluntary departure that didn't fit the family's understanding of the girls, an encounter with someone they trusted, or a forced abduction that somehow escaped reliable observation. As decades passed, relatives increasingly conducted searches of their own. They followed tips, examined rural areas, walked creek beds and roads, and sought assistance from private searchers. Rachel's brother, Rusty Arnold, became one of the most visible advocates for renewed attention to the case, maintaining public information about the trio and pursuing locations he believed might contain evidence. In 2018, private divers examined submerged vehicles in Benbrook Lake after Arnold and others raised the possibility that one might be connected to the disappearance. Vehicles were recovered or inspected, but the effort produced no evidence linking them to Rachel, Renee, or Julie. The search illustrated both the determination of the families and the difficulty of assessing theories after the passage of so much time. A submerged car can appear promising until it's identified, dated, and examined. In this instance, another possibility ended without resolving the case. Public awareness efforts continued. Billboards and media reports marked later anniversaries and encouraged anyone with information to contact authorities. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children maintained records for all three girls and produced age-progressed images showing how they might appear as adults. Their cases continue to be associated with the Fort Worth Police Department. No one has ever been charged in connection with the disappearance. Public reporting has discussed various people who relatives, researchers, or commentators have suspected, but suspicion is not evidence of guilt. Without a verified confession, physical evidence, reliable eyewitness identification, or other corroboration, naming private individuals as responsible would be unjustified. The letter remains similarly unresolved. Its wording can be interpreted as evidence of a runaway plan, a message written under coercion, or a deliberate deception. Its physical characteristics and inconclusive handwriting examinations have prevented any one interpretation from prevailing. Even the reference to Houston has never produced a confirmed trail showing that the girls traveled there. The strongest conclusion the evidence supports is the most limited. Rachel, Renee, and Julie left on a shopping trip on December 23, 1974. Rachel's car was found locked at Seminary South at approximately 6 o'clock, with purchases inside and the keys missing. A disputed letter arrived the next day. No confirmed communication from any of the girls followed. Everything beyond those facts remains uncertain. More than 50 years after the disappearance, the passage of time has transformed nearly every part of the case. Seminary South was eventually renamed La Grande Plaza de Fort Worth. Stores closed or changed names. Vehicles, records, and physical locations disappeared. Witnesses aged, memories faded, and several of the girls' parents died without learning what happened to their daughters. Yet public interest in the case has endured because its central facts remain so difficult to comprehend. After all, this wasn't a disappearance from a remote wilderness area or an isolated road. 3 girls vanished during a holiday shopping trip in a populated section of Fort Worth. Their car remained behind in a public parking area with all their possessions inside. The ages of the missing girls make the case especially haunting. Rachel was 17, married but still a high school student. Renee was 14 and planning to return to her family and boyfriend. Julie was just 9 and had joined the outing only after repeatedly asking her mother's permission. Their lives were at very different stages, making the idea of a coordinated, permanent disappearance very difficult to explain. Had they survived, Rachel would now be 68 years old. Renee would be 65, and Julie would be 61. Age-progressed images allow the public to imagine those older faces, but they can't show the lives the girls might have lived, the families they might have formed, or the ordinary years denied to everyone who loved them. It remains possible that someone still living knows exactly what happened. Perhaps a witness who misunderstood what was seen, someone who heard a confession, or a person who remained silent out of fear or loyalty. It's also possible that decisive evidence was lost long ago. Until reliable new information emerges, neither hope nor suspicion can substitute for proof. The Fort Worth missing trio case endures as one of America's most haunting unsolved disappearances because it's built around an absence that has never been filled. No confirmed destination, no identified perpetrator, no recovered remains, and no explanation for why 3 girls failed to return from a few hours of Christmas shopping. The mysterious letter appeared to promise that the separation would last only a week. More than half a century later, their families are still waiting. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help others discover the show. Your support helps us continue exploring the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries, one story at a time. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes a mystery survives, not because there are no clues, but because every clue seems to point toward a different answer.